Geto has a possibility of regaining control of his body, and we're only one step away from it. Honestly, if this was all just a coincidence, I would let Akutami-sensei slap me as hard as he wants for making this theory video, because everything is just laid out a little bit too neatly, if you know what I mean. I came into this video thinking the answer was going to be no, and all of the research that I did after that proved me wrong. So that gives you an idea of where I stood in this area before I started researching for this video. Before we start though, I want to just settle this so there's no confusion. This is Geto, this is Kenjaku, and this is Norita Shikamo. Let's tackle some low-key circumstantial evidence, the concept of the soul, the evidence, and then we discuss the likelihood of Geto regaining control of his body and the scenarios that need to happen for him to get there. Here is something that I don't believe to be evidence, but worth mentioning. 2 out of the 2 special grade sorcerers, Gojo and Tsukumo, who saw Kenjaku, addressed him as Geto. Before anyone argues with me about the TikTok that I made, upon seeing Geto's body being used by Kenjaku, without a single breath of hesitation, Satoru Gojo denies what his power is telling him, denies his 6 eyes telling him that this is Geto, his body, his cursed energy. Gojo recognized it on a dime. Tsukumo had more information to go off on. She just believed that Geto is also in there after all of the exposition that had been laid out. Tsukumo says, I was talking to Geto as she was discussing philosophies that they discussed some 10 years prior. Gojo says, time to wake up, Geto. How are you going to let your body get used like that? And Geto actually responds. And another thing I want to mention is that Kenjaku literally says he caught himself acting like Geto. If that isn't foreshadowing, I don't know what is. The puzzle pieces. The exposition for all of these clues that I'm about to tell you was so neatly laid out alongside the culling game exposition that I wonder if this was done this way to kind of just let it slide away from the readers and have them focus on the culling game itself. So I have 3 pieces of the puzzle for you today. The first one is that Kenjaku as Geto consumed Mahito, thereby got his idol transfiguration technique, which can modify the brains of people to make them predisposed to becoming vessels and curse technique users. What the f is Kenjaku? Kenjaku is just a talking brain, a talking evil brain with a mouth that's kind of like a curse technique and kind of part human. So Kenjaku is not only susceptible to idol transfiguration, but is also a separate soul of his own. But it doesn't stop there. It gets even better. We also get a clue in passing from Kenjaku and Mahito. For Mahito, the soul comes before the body. The body tightly conforms to the shape of the soul. So cursed spirits can get damaged, but as long as their soul remains intact, they can heal. Per Kenjaku, the body is the soul and the soul is the body, but Mahito rebutted that it doesn't have to be the same for them. Let's operate on the fact that humans and sorcerers bear their soul in their body, and their body is their soul, meaning that their body and soul are one. If the body gets damaged, the soul is damaged as well. If the body is manipulated, then the soul is manipulated. Vice versa. If we're considering the fanbook canon, Kenjaku's brain is part curse technique, but also flesh that belonged to his original body, thereby carrying his soul. So now we know how souls and bodies generally work in this universe for sorcerers and cursed spirits. The body is the soul and the soul is the body. Being in a human body, Kenjaku makes himself part of it, thereby vulnerable to manipulations of that body. This means that Geto's soul is still present, and it's revealed to us that the body keeps the techniques that it acquires. That's why Kenjaku inhabiting Geto does not have blood manipulation techniques, because that stayed in Norita Shikamo's body. The soul that now holds the technique for idol transfiguration is Geto's. This will be relevant when we talk about the scenarios. Now I have the penultimate piece to this puzzle. Geto is able to move his body separate from Kenjaku's will. He did it when Gojo asked him to wake up. Now there only begs one question, and this is where it all rides. Can Geto use his curse technique despite Kenjaku's control? Because if Geto can touch his own body and use his own innate ability, it means that he can use idol transfiguration. Why is this important? Well, first, since Kenjaku is basically a brain, we know that he's susceptible to idol transfiguration. Kenjaku uses idol transfiguration to pinpoint, change people's brain disposition. But what if he was instead idol transfiguration into, say, being the opposite, being unable to use cursed energy. If Geto uses idol transfiguration to make Kenjaku inert, Geto's soul, I imagine, would have a much easier time fighting back and even fully gaining control of his body again. Now, I think that's honestly too easy. So this second scenario, I feel like is a little bit more reasonable because I don't think that 1,000-year-old sorcerer just gets gottomed like that. Since his cursed technique is basically to pilot someone else's body, I imagine there's a low amount of rejection there just by virtue of how the technique works. You want the mind and the body to work together to be able to use the technique. Kenjaku's whole technique is for the flow of their souls to work in unison so he can gain access to memories and curse techniques. This primes Geto to utilize the polymorphic soul isomer on himself if he is able to access his curse technique against Kenjaku's will, thereby fusing them into one unit. And this is honestly pretty awful if you think about it, because I don't want Geto to have to live with an evil sorcerer as his brain. But it is an avenue for him to gain control of his body back, mostly. And this is the last scenario I came up with, and honestly, I think the best case scenario out of all of this. Geto uses idol transfiguration to access his soul and modify his body according to that in a way that rejects Kenjaku from it, because the soul is the body and the body is the soul. Having access to the soul just makes Geto able to transform his body so long as he has the cursed energy to use it, which, as one of the most powerful sorcerers, dubbed "we're the strongest," Geto definitely has the cursed energy for it. It's just a matter of whether he's able to reject Kenjaku for long enough to use it. It's been repeatedly drilled into us that Geto's cursed energy is still present, so much so that the Six Eyes recognize it. We also have a precedent for regenerating bodies in that Sukuna takes over and straight up just heals Yuji's hands, his heart, vital organs, the same way that a cursed spirit would, even though Yuji's body is technically still human. If Geto gains control of his soul, maybe he makes himself a new brain, and since this is basically build a jujutsu sorcerer, we can get Geto back, and hopefully this time he goes to therapy instead of trying genocide as the first option. What do you think of this theory? I honestly didn't expect to end up here, but here we are. If you want more Geto content, click the video on your screen right now. I think it's over here. Bye.